Everybody, listen carefully.
You're listening to the SEC Insider Hit on the Bolt Bound Show.
Fueled by Fleetway Market.
Fuel up your car and cooler at Fleetway this football season.
Let's go.
Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports, joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line as we don't have the Pac-12 anymore. And we're all monitoring maybe what the ACC will do or won't do. And why are they listening to Notre Dame? If Notre Dame ends up, Notre Dame and Miami end up going to the Big Ten at some point. This is Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone ESPN. Ross Dellenger, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Good morning. How you doing, Bo?
I'm good, man. Okay. Are you to blame for the Pac-12?
Yes. Point the finger at me.
A
lot of fingers being pointed. Who's to blame? It's probably a lot of things. You know, it probably goes back to Larry Scott's decision to start up the Pac-12 network and not partner with a big ESPN or Fox. Probably goes to George Kliavkoff's situation this past year of mismanaging maybe some things or even misleading presidents, and then the presidents are to blame. Remember, the commissioners serve at the behest of the presidents of each school. So there's a little bit of blame to go around. And then overall, Bo, the real overarching blame is probably just on the general cultural landscape of America, right? People care less about college football on the West Coast than they do anywhere else in the country, aside maybe from the Northeast, the very Northeast or something, but New England area. But outside of that, they care less. They don't attend the games as much. They don't donate as much, and that's kind of where we are.
Ross Dellenger on the Out of Bounds show. What do you make of the whole Texas Longhorns? Pac-12 may have thought they had a deal in 2013. ESPN creates the Longhorn Network. Didn't really care where it was, if anybody could find it or if anybody was watching it. But it kept Texas kind of maybe where they needed them to be. And then several years later, Texas joins the SEC. Your thoughts on kind of how that all played out, Ross?
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to think about what could have been if Texas had made the leap, and they were so close to going. I know there have been several stories written about how close Texas was to joining the Pac-12 10, 12 years ago, whenever it was. And I mean, it was just it was a close call. And if it had gone that way, it'd be really fascinating to see how the landscape would be right now, right? We USC and UCLA probably wouldn't have left the Big Ten, and
right.
Certainly, I don't think Texas. If that were the case, I don't know that Texas would have left, for the SEC. Would have left the Pac-12 for the SEC. You don't have any of this. So these decisions, these key decisions, really impact things years in advance. And it's crazy to go back and think of how things would have changed. And you can do that with a lot of decisions that were made. These are really big calls. And it's kind of fascinating to look back.
Okay, let's talk about what the SEC may or may not do over the next few years. Commissioner Sankey, you've got a relationship with him. People are quoting him, interviewing him. They're in a good spot, Ross. They don't have to do anything. Texas and Oklahoma joining the party, very healthy conference, money coming in, all that. People are going to watch. Like you said, we're nuts down here in the Sun Belt over college football. So, does Florida State bring enough value? Does Clemson bring enough value? My opinion, and I could be wrong, that the next throwdown is going to be for North Carolina between SEC and Big Ten and maybe UVA. And here's why. North Carolina is the biggest state without an SEC or Big Ten school. They are a national brand. There's different tiers to national brands, and they're really good academically. Do you like where I'm going? You disagree? What do you make of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was on the phone yesterday with a high-ranking SEC person, and I told him that the Big Ten it's got to 18. What do you think about that? And he said, I don't care if they get to 40. We're fine as we are now. But while that is said, while I think the SEC is quite comfortable in the current position, the landscape continues to change. And I don't know that there's any schools out there that really bring value, that are available and bring value to the SEC, right? However, there are some that are unavailable right now that would bring value to the SEC. And while most maybe think that's the Florida States, Miami's, and Clemson's, it's not, right? And then I wrote this back in May in a realignment story that new states are what are most attractive. And North Carolina's that, as you mentioned, Virginia's that. The SEC wants to, probably you've heard Greg Sankey use multiple times contiguous states, and those would fall in line with that. Culturally, they're somewhat similar to SEC programs, but they bring the value. The SEC is in Florida already, right? The SEC is in South Carolina already. You'd have fights on your hands with those schools, SEC schools in those states already, for adding other in-state programs like a Clemson or Florida State. Not only that, but you're already in that state, and new states bring new money. They bring new viewership. They literally bring new money. You'd be what's called in-network for the SEC network. You get more money if you have a school in a state. So it certainly makes a lot of sense that North Carolina specifically would be more attractive. However, they're unavailable, right? All those schools I just said are, at least right now, unavailable because they're locked up in a grant of rights for 13 more years. And I can tell you one thing, the SEC is not going to dabble, and nor is the Big Ten, I don't believe, going to dabble and get involved in legal issues with the grant of rights. Now, if schools want to take it upon themselves, like it appears Florida State is bound to break the grant of rights on their own and get out, handle legal issues on their own, maybe go independent for a few years, then maybe are they more available for the SEC? Probably so.
Okay. Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports, on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. What about, I may have framed that up the wrong way, Ross, the throwdown between the SEC and the Big Ten at some point, you're right, with the grant of rights through 2036. Although if the conference implodes overnight, then everybody that's the scenario I envision. Kind of everything goes sideways and so on. But should I have framed it up, instead of an SEC Big Ten throwdown, that for North Carolina, it's a ESPN, Disney, Fox battle royal?
Yeah, more so. Yeah. The grant of rights, if you talk to most lawyers, probably 99% of them, they'll say it's pretty ironclad. But there are lawyers, they happen to be located in Tallahassee, Florida, in Clemson, South Carolina, that believe that maybe there's some wiggle room there. Now, you're talking about another option, which is at least 7, maybe 8 schools getting together, which we reported about back in May, right? That the 7 ACC schools were talking amongst themselves, and they actually met a few times. There's a lot of ACC, I think, reporters who want to disregard all that and think that it wasn't serious. Believe me, it was serious. They met multiple times together and discussed an exit strategy. And the exit strategy was going to be to dissolve the league. If you get more than half, to agree to dissolve the league, they believed the league dissolves. However, they really needed an 8th, and then even at that point, it could have been legal trouble. There could have been some legal issues. So it kind of slowed down, and then when it leaked out on my story in May, it kind of stopped, at least for now. But that gives you an idea of how serious half the league is, of getting out of this thing.
Mm.
Now, the third option you mentioned, right, it involves ESPN, Disney, involves them like negotiating with the schools to let them out, kind of like Fox did and the Big 12 did with Oklahoma and Texas leaving a year early. I get no inclination that ESPN or the ACC is going to do that in this case.
Okay. Ross Dellenger has been all over this, Yahoo Sports. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show. When you think about the SEC and ESPN versus the Big Ten and Fox for North Carolina, several years ago, or just even a few weeks ago, Ross, before the Pac-12 implodes, I think a lot of people thought Big Ten is in the catbird seat because of their academics and so on. And if this ever happened, that's where North Carolina would gravitate. I think now, if this comes to fruition or, starts to play out the next 3, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, that the SEC has more aces, Ross, because of what just happened with the Big Ten and all those schools out west, and North Carolina will be like, hey, we can join this conference and we don't have to send our tennis, golf, volleyball, and everybody else all around the country. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think, I visited Chapel Hill quite a bit. Look, when you see the town and walk through campus, it reminds you of a lot of SEC schools. I think the academic side of the school would tell you that they prefer the Big Ten and they fit in better there. I think the athletic side of it would tell you they'd prefer the SEC and they fit in better there. I don't know what the answer is, but I think one of the determining factors, the top determining factor is money, right? If there's too big of a gap between the money, it makes things easy and makes the decision easy. But the other determining factor is exactly what you're talking about, right? It's which involves money too, right? Travel and expenditures on getting to places like Eugene in LA, as opposed to getting to the farthest SEC places like Norman and Fayetteville. So I think that in the end, and it's funny, last time I visited North Carolina, at Chapel Hill, I was out with somebody that works there, and we were talking about this exact thing. And he was telling me about the decision, if that ever comes, that awaits North Carolina, and how there is going to be probably a split within the school of what approach to take there, what direction to go. And it's fascinating. It's going to be fascinating if it ever comes about.
Yeah, I just think the SEC now has the advantage because of Fox and the Big Ten. Here's follow-up. Because of the pressure and demand that will be on student athletes, there's already a ton of pressure on student athletes daily. But because of this new pressure and demand that has been created through the Big Ten and Fox going crazy, did Fox and the Big Ten jump the gun, in your opinion, Ross, with what just happened?
I think, and I think it's been well written and reported, like the Big Ten, a portion of the Big Ten specifically, some of the schools in power were at least at first against further expansion. They've been pretty public about it. But when your TV partner, who, by the way, owns, I think it's like 60%, 65% of the TV deal, and then in a partner in Fox who made decisions on your overall TV deal and set in on meetings with other TV networks during negotiations for the TV deal, you know who runs the show. Fox has a lot of authority and power. And if they come and say, we got an extra $65 million a year to give you to go get Oregon and Washington, so it's a reduced rate for them, and nobody else has to take a cut from the pie, you know, I guess you say yes.
Mhm.
That kind of seems like what happened there. Um, and I think most people in college athletics would say, even some of the Big Ten, that it's not good for college athletics what happened to the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, okay. What about? I think Notre Dame and Miami end up in the Big Ten at some point. Do you?
I have a hard time believing that Notre Dame, which is in the middle of a negotiation for a new TV deal with NBC that could be pretty large in long term, that they would end up in a conference anytime soon. Maybe, I guess, down the line, maybe a decade or more, decades, plural. Maybe they end up being shoved into a conference. I'll tell you a story, a really quick story. I spoke at a Notre Dame event with the school president and the athletic director here in D.C. a few months ago, and it was like all the bigwigs were there from Notre Dame, all the D.C. Notre Dame alumni and folks, including a Supreme Court justice and a couple of U.S. senators were in attendance, all Notre Dame folks. And the athletic director was asked a question on stage about Notre Dame's role in realignment. And Jack Swarbrick took the microphone and said, and I'll never forget this. He said, "I know one thing: Notre Dame has no involvement in realignment. We are independent and will stay that way." He didn't get a ovation. He got a standing ovation from the crowd. In that, I remember thinking, if whoever changes Notre Dame's course and conference trajectory is going to get booed out of office, because the people just love the independence. They love to be different. And as long as they're getting money from NBC, enough money, they'll continue that way.
Okay.
So I just don't think that's something imminent. Miami is a totally different question. Yeah, I could see,
I think they're going.
I could see Miami fitting into the Big Ten quite nicely. And actually, when Kevin Warren was over the Big Ten and created a list of expansion targets, Miami was pretty high up there from what I understand.
Okay. Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports, senior college football reporter. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Fascinating what's happening in the world of collegiate athletics. Did Fox and the Big Ten jump the gun by doing what they did this has been ongoing for a while, but will it hurt them the next time there is a big heavyweight fight between North Carolina? I would say they had the advantage prior to the massive expansion on the West Coast. Now I don't think they do. Do you think that Florida State, all right, this ACC thing, it sounds like Swarbrick, for our listeners, Jack Swarbrick is the athletic director at Notre Dame. Ross just referenced him. Do you find it, I don't know, not comical, but you kind of chuckle that Notre Dame's not even a full member in the sport that generates money in football? They are in the other sports, and that they are trying to, I don't know, dictate or influence definitely what the ACC may or may not do with Cal and Stanford. Ross?
The Calford situation has been fascinating to watch. It makes no sense, right? And most people in college athletics will tell you it makes no sense for them to go to the ACC, and I think it's probably why they couldn't get the votes in the straw poll a couple nights ago. And it seems like it's a dead issue, but I think they're still talking about things in the ACC. And Bo, I don't know, if the ACC ultimately denies them, which appears again going to happen. I don't know what they do, and I'm writing about that, and hopefully today it'll drop on Yahoo Sports of what the path for the Pac-4 will be, specifically Cal and Stanford. And a lot of it does depend on Stanford. They're the biggest brand. A few people know like how historic I think that Stanford's athletic prowess is. They've won the most national championships, and much of it in Olympic sports, obviously. They've won the NACDA Directors Cup like 26 out of 29 years. Yeah, that is awarded to the best athletic department when it comes to success of teams. It's incredible. And they're number 3 ranked academic university in the country. And they're out and homeless. It's a fascinating thing and a sad thing, probably. And I don't know what they do. I think that they have knocked on the Big Ten door quite a bit, even taking a significantly reduced rate to get in the Big Ten. And for now, the door's closed.
Ross Dellenger on the Out of Bounds Show. We got a couple of minutes here, Ross. As far as the SEC, do you believe in the next 5 years? No, hold on. Florida State and Clemson. Do you think that they will end up in the SEC or the Big Ten at some point?
In the next 5 years?
Yeah. 5-ish.
Oh man, it's tough. It's tough to say. I'm gonna say no, but I'm not real confident in that no, because I do think somebody, preferably or most notably Florida State, given their public actions lately, that they will challenge the GOR. But they're not going to get an invitation or a spot in the SEC or Big Ten, I don't think, until they challenge the GOR, win, and probably be independent maybe for a few years. So it's hard. I don't think in 5 years maybe that happens. But in 10, I would probably feel more confident to say yes. But in 5, it's a little tougher.
All right. We'll leave it there. How's everything going at Yahoo?
Great, man. Same role, pretty much same job, just new employer, bigger digital audience, and it's been good. Been rocking and rolling. I haven't taken a breath. My first 3 or 4 weeks has been quite busy with all this stuff.
Well, you do a great job. Appreciate your time, and all the fun's right around the corner in a couple of weeks, so we're all ready. Appreciate you, man.
All right, bud. Thanks.
Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports, National College Football writer. He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. So ACC expansion on life support. And Stanford, he mentioned how big they are academically, how many national championships they've won. And they may not have a home. They were willing to take a reduced rate to go to the Big Ten. No invite. Does it make sense for the ACC to go get Stanford and Cal? Sure doesn't look like it. That's for sure. But the next war, in my opinion, is Fox versus ESPN, or Fox in the Big Ten and ESPN in the SEC for North Carolina. Tar Heels, baby. Have a great weekend. Hey, don't forget about the amazing burgers at Burgers, Blues, and Barbecue. We love their onion rings. They've got the blue plates, lunch specials. Their smoked chicken is magnificent. They got some fried pickles, too, that pair very, very well with a Michelob Ultra or a Stella Artois. Enjoy the weekend. Oh, one more thing. Tito's Vodka Bloody Mary at Highball Lanes tomorrow morning. And it's National Bowling Day. Go ahead and grab some friends and bowl all weekend at Highball Lanes in Fondren. Thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back Monday. See ya. Have a good weekend. Thanks for listening.